Alright guys, I'm doing my 1 year review of my General Grabber ATX tires. If you haven't watched my previous videos about a year ago now, I put on 33 12.5 15 General Grabber ATX tires on the stock 15x7 rims on my 2004 Nissan Xterra. Just for a little bit of background on other tires that I've had so you can kind of understand how I'm making my judgment. I used to have 265 75/16 Cooper Discover ATP tires from Discount Tire Direct. They're pretty decent tires, but they're definitely more highway biased. And then I also had 33 10.5 15 BF Goodrich KM2, the mud terrains. Definitely much more off-road focus and not as good on the highway. So what do I think about the General Grabber ATX? So I'm going to divide my review up into kind of two sections. The first section is going to be the General tire itself, just General Grabber ATX. The second section of my review is going to be more focused on the specific application and how it has performed on the 2004 Nissan Xterra on the 15x7 rims. Now this review is not going to be some super detailed and organized and thorough thought out ranking scale where I judge things and try and figure out which one's the best. This is just going to be me talking to you guys, letting you know my thoughts, because I do get asked this in the comments quite frequently. So first off, just the General Grabber ATX tire in general, absolutely love it. It's very comfortable on road, which is what I was mainly looking to get out of an all-terrain tire after having previously been on a mud terrain tire. I don't have really any noticeable or objectionable road noise. Now, of course, that's subjective and it depends on what you're used to. So I had worn out KM2 mud terrain tires and they were very loud to where I couldn't have a cell phone conversation. So obviously going to any all-terrain tire, it's going to be very nice to my ears. If you're going from a highway tire, you might notice a little more road noise. I honestly don't find it objectionable though. So as far as on-road characteristics and just general comfort, they are awesome. So I have about 8,000 miles on the tires right now, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't really monitor my tread wear or anything, so I just kind of rotate them every time I do an oil change, maybe once or twice a year, and I just roll with it. So they haven't seemed to be wearing unusually fast. They still look virtually brand new, which is what you would expect for 8,000 miles. For comparison, on my KM2s, I only got 27,000 miles on them before they were worn all the way down. Of course, that's what you would expect with a mud terrain tire though. So I have absolutely no issues and no complaints with the way that they're wearing in so far. So talking about the actual performance and how they drive, they're very stable on the highway, no real drone or anything. They have, in dry conditions, excellent grip. Like it's literally just a complete non-event on regular roadways. So it's, like I said, comfortable driving. It handles well. One of the things that I was concerned about, and this is kind of because of the size of the tire, but because of the large contact patch, I was afraid the steering would be a little heavy, especially like in parking lots. Not the case. I have not had any issues with that. Now in the rain, the other thing I was originally concerned about is, again, because it's kind of a larger contact patch, like when you're driving down, a road and on the curb on the side after a rain, you get like a big puddle of water and it kind of catches one side of your tires and it can kind of jerk the steering wheel. I was afraid that that would be, much worse on this. But I can say that I've had a number of situations like that and it just sheds the water perfectly. I've had no issues with it hydroplaning. I have no issues with it slipping around in kind of rainy weather. So they have just been significantly better than, again, a mud terrain tire in those type of conditions. One of the tests that I kind of do is there's a stoplight that's kind of at a hill, and anytime that the pavement is even slick, with any amount of moisture, when you're at a stop and you try and go to turn right or start on the hill, I always chirp my tires with the KM2s. Nothing, even if I punch the gas, these grip the wet pavement really well. So I've had them in some pretty big rainstorms, no issues, and again, big water puddles on the side of the road, no issues at all. Like, this is an awesome tire. I really love them. So if I want to talk about off-road performance, I'm going to talk about sand first, because I have taken it out on the beach and driven in the sand. Now, of course, this comes into play with the size due to the increased contact patch, but they handle awesome in the sand. KM2s, they did well in the sand too, but one of the things that you get with mud terrain tires, because they are so knobby, sometimes on loose and dry sand, they'll actually do a better job of clearing the sand out and digging you down deeper as opposed to pushing you forward. So these things do great on the sand, never been stuck with them. I am kind of an experienced beach driver though, so part of that is also technique and driver experience. But they do fine, and actually I've taken them out on the sand without even airing down, and again, contact patch plays into that with the flotation on the sand, but they do great. I can just crawl through soft dry sand and it does a great job. I will say for general off-road performance, I have had them out at UARI a couple times, and like the theme of the first part of this review, right? The drive to get to a trail is so much better because you can actually stand being in the truck without having your ears go deaf. On the actual dirt, I mean, fantastic grip. These things are awesome. On rock ledges, I can just like crawl up them. And actually, I looked at some footage from when I had my older KM2s, and of course, this is the end of life of a KM2. But the KM2 would actually like slip the tire, especially like on loose dirt going up hills and on kind of smooth and slick rocks. It would just kind of skip the tires and slip them a little bit, and I actually kind of had to gas it up a little bit to get over ledges, whereas these had a very nice controlled crawl up them. Now, I'm not saying that the General Grabber ATX is going to be better off-road than a KM2, but you got to take into account the life of the tire, right? I'm comparing the KM2 at the end of life when it had 27,000 miles, and I'm comparing these when they are brand new, right? So there's going to be some bias there, but I will say just from the all-around package, off-road, sand driving, in the water, and driving just on dry pavement, ATX, by far my favorite tire that I've ever owned. Now, I've not had the chance to drive them in the snow yet. They are 3-peak snowflake rated, so I don't feel like that's going to be an issue if that's something that you're concerned about. So we're going to transition a little bit into the actual application with this tire and this tire size on it. So the tire itself really had no issues being balanced, other than the fact it was very difficult for the tire shop to get the wheel weights onto the rim, and that's because it's a 12.5-inch wide tire on a 7-inch wide rim, so you get a lot of sidewall bulge. That puts a lot of pressure on the inside lip of that rim and the flange there, and that also makes it, you know, good to hold your tires on when you air down, but it also makes it bad when you're trying to slide a wheel weight onto them. Sticky wheel weights would have been better than the hammer-on wheel weights, but hey, the tire shop decided instead to just struggle with the hammer-on wheel weights. I haven't really had any vibration issues with them, like I said, other than it was just a little difficult for the tire shop. It took them a long time of messing around with the weights to get them on. So I will say, just in general, a 12.5-inch wide tire on a 7-inch rim, I've not had any issues with it. You know, the tire shop warned me, oh, this is a bad thing to do. It's going to be way too floaty. It's going to be very swirly. And honestly, I thought my KM2s, especially at the end of life with less tread, were far more squirrely than these. I was honestly thinking with all of the volume of air in these tires that, you know, if you're making a turn or merging on the highway or something, that you would like feel the whole vehicle shake. But I really haven't noticed any difference in how it behaves like that when compared to, you know, my other 33-inch tires, the KM2s. So really, I haven't really noticed anything negative about the tire size as far as performance goes. Fitment is a little bit of a different story. So I did a video when I first got them installed about having to adjust the steering stops out, and then I ended up getting wheel spacers for the rear wheels to try and give them just a little bit of extra spacing to the inside of the frame rails, because I know that axle is going to be flexing when I'm off-road, and I don't want the sidewall to rub up on the flanges on the inside of the frame rail. Front tires are also a little bit of a challenge of fitment. There's so much ballooning of the sidewall. When you use the stock rims and the stock back spacing, you know, it tucks them inside the fender well, which is good for being able to fit during turns when your front tires are turning from left to right. But it also means that that balloon sidewall is going to be closer to your ABS brake sensors, closer to your brake lines, and it does get pretty close to rubbing some things. And I had to, especially since I had the aftermarket lift control arms, so they don't have the stock bracketry that holds those lines in the stock location, I really had to make sure that I cinched those down with zip ties to keep everything out of the way. Now, I did not have to trim any sheet metal for the fitment on my vehicle, but again, I have a 2-inch body lift, I have a 3-inch suspension lift, I also have a tube-style front off-road bumper, so that doesn't really give me any material in the front edge of the tire that could be rubbing on it. But this is definitely something that it's not going to be plug and play, right? It's not something that you can just order that tire size, go to the tire shop, have them put it on, and drive and not know that anything's going on with your vehicle. You're going to have to be mechanically inclined and be willing to do the work and investigation into getting them set up and making sure that you have the proper clearances. So the other thing with fitment of a wide tire on a narrow rim is that instead of the tire tread laying completely flat on the ground, it does kind of have a arced ballooning type effect on the top of the tread. So the tire pressure is 35 psi as far as the max pressure that's written on the sidewall. If you look at the door jamb on the Nissan Xterra, it'll also tell you 35 psi, but that's for a stock sized tire. So it is a bit different when you have more volume of air in there. That being said, I aired it down to about 28 to 30 psi. and I still notice that the tire tread doesn't quite sit flat. Now, it gets, I don't know, maybe 90% of the tread width, but whenever I drive on a gravel or dusty road or drive in some dirt and then I look at my tires afterwards, I can see where it's, a half inch on either edge of the tire is not making contact. It's just, on the center part of the tread. Now, when it's all said and done, do I regret getting this size on the Nissan Xterra? No, I don't. I prefer the 33 10.5/15s. I think they just fit better, but I don't think that this is a bad tire size to get if you have a heavily modified and lifted vehicle. I will say that the tire selection is just significantly better on 33 12.5/15. And if they had these tires at a 33 10.5/15, I would get the skinny 33 instead of the wide 33. But the only ones that you can really get are going to be the BFG KM2s and the KO2s and the 10.5 wide tire. And if you're not trying to spend the extra money on the BF Goodrich brand name or some of the others, there's only a few tires that make that size. The 33 12.5 is a reasonable tire size to go to. They have a lot of selection. The prices are a lot better on this size tire. It's just that it is, like I said, more in depth, and you got to check things and clearances and make sure that you're not going to, rub through a brake line or rub through an ABS sensor. You got to make sure that you're not rubbing on your fender flares and stuff in the front and the mud flaps. I had to trim some plastic that was already trimmed on my vehicle, but I did not have to trim any sheet metal, like I said. If I had less lift, I would go with a 32 and 11.5-inch tire because I think the extra width on the bigger tires does complicate things, and I think the 32 11.5 would be a good tire to go with as well. But honestly, I felt like with all the lift that I have, it would just look kind of goofy to get a 32-inch tire. I thought it would just look too small, like it's on donuts, and I didn't really want that look, right? You can do all sorts of mods for performance and all that good stuff, but sometimes it comes down to look. So that's where I arrived at the 33 12.5/15 tire. So on the topic of setting tire pressure, this is just what I arrived at. So obviously tire pressure, a tire shop will tell you it's safety related, so don't listen to a guy on the internet. Do your own research and make up your own mind. A lot of people do the chalk test where you put some chalk across the entire width of your tire tread, then you go drive straight forward for a little bit, and then you look and you see how much chalk has worn away, and then you keep lowering your tire pressure until the chalk wears away on the entire width of the tire. I did not do that. I instead consulted the tire load inflation table. So I'll explain that in a little bit. I'll put them on the screen and I'll walk you through kind of the assumptions of how I did the calculation. At a high level, a tire is going to be rated at a certain tire pressure, and at that tire pressure it's going to have a max amount of weight that it can handle. So you got to figure out how much your vehicle weighs, make some assumptions based on how much weight is going to be on any tire at any given time, and then make sure that you don't go too low to where you're below the threshold, and include a factor of safety for loading it down with gear and people and fluids and a full tank of gas and things like that. So I ended up just running them at 30 psi. That was low enough where I got most of the contact patch, and I didn't really want to go below that because I got a heavy vehicle. So math and theory can only take you so far, and then there's kind of the sanity check and comfort. Even though I know some old vehicles had tire pressures in the 20s or whatever, and some people run around on 10 psi tires all the time, so whatever. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the General Grabber ATX tire. Like I said, only 8,000 miles on them so far, but everything so far has been really good. A little bit of fitment, I wouldn't say issues, but work to make sure that they worked well on the 2004 Nissan Xterra, but you got to have a lot of lift to clear them. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content of these videos. We'll see you in the next one.